10:05 on a Friday morning, and yes, yesterday I think I said it was Tuesday, but it's definitely Thursday yesterday and Friday today, and it is a very good morning to federal member for McPherson, Karen Andrews.
Good morning, how are you today?
Losing track of time, how about you?
Well, I'm pleased it's Friday today. I don't want to go back to Tuesday.
No,
I'm ready for the weekend.
I'm ready for the weekend. It's beautiful blue sky days. I'm ready to enjoy it for the weekend. So,
yes.
Nice to have you back. You've had a little bit of time away. You've been very busy.
Yeah, so we've had the last couple of weeks in Canberra. So this week I was back on the Gold Coast, which is always great. We've got another week back on the coast and then 2 weeks back in Canberra. And then we go on what's called the winter recess, which is when we all vacate Canberra.
Yeah, very cold down there.
Yes, very cold.
This is a Talkback program. If you've got a question for Karen Andrews, federal member for McPherson, on anything to do with a political nature, I'm sure you've got other questions you might like to ask. She is ready, willing and able to take your call and answer that question, or do her best to answer that question. All right. Last week in Parliament, you spoke about the top 4 issues that Gold Coasters are talking about: transport, overdevelopment, crime and the cost of living. So can you run through those issues for the listeners?
Yes, absolutely. So just by way of introducing that, we get various speaking opportunities in Parliament where we can talk specifically about our electorate, or, to be honest, any other topic that we'd like. I generally talk about my electorate. And so this time it was a 90-second statement, so I had to speak quite quickly to get the 90 seconds, get all the topics through. But throughout the time that I've been the member for McPherson, I've always gone out, spoken to people to understand what their issues are. So when I spoke in Parliament about the 4 top issues, they were based on the feedback that we get into my office, but also when I'm out speaking to people. We also call people, we ring them up, we find out what their views are. The number one issue was transport. So particularly on the southern Gold Coast, that is a very contentious issue. So without getting into the pluses and minuses of any particular form of transport at the moment, the Gold Coast is a very different city to everywhere else because it's a linear city and people have to cover quite large distances to get from one end of the coast to the other. But as we're starting to grow, people are starting to move further west away from the coast, which means that the transport has to move away from your major arterial roads, so, you know, the M1, Bermuda Street, and
sure,
what it becomes further north in the Gold Coast Highway. You've got light rail that at this stage is only funded as far as Burleigh Heads. You've got potential to extend the heavy rail to take that further south, potentially take that through to the airport. People are getting very concerned about how the roads are choked at the moment. And of course, whilst we're upgrading the M1, yes, that's always going to be difficult, but it is very hard for people to get anywhere in a short space of time. So transport is the number one issue. People on the southern Gold Coast are very concerned about overdevelopment, particularly along the Gold Coast Highway, because they're saying we've got a housing affordability crisis, but the units that are being built along the Gold Coast Highway are not affordable for many of the people who are looking for accommodation here on the coast. So overdevelopment, people like the coast to stay as close to what it originally was, which is a series of small villages, as it possibly can. That's obviously going to have to change over time as more people come in. So people are saying if there's going to be development there, let's actually think through the process and make sure that it is appropriate to the areas that are there. So overdevelopment is certainly one. Crime, not a day goes by when someone doesn't talk to me about crime and the fact that, you know, they've had their car stolen or their house broken into, or they know someone who has. People don't feel safe out on the streets. And it is a big issue for people. And if you go onto Facebook to many of the community groups that are there, they are constantly talking about, you know, gangs around the streets, break and enters, cars being stolen out of people's front yards, and it is just an ongoing issue for people. So, yes, so certainly crime. And, of course, from a federal point of view, our entry point to that is the fact that a lot of it is drug-fuelled.
Yes.
So people are either high on drugs when they're doing it, or they're looking for what they can get to sell so that they can buy more drugs. So we need to do everything that we possibly can to stop these drugs from coming across the borders. So that's where the federal role lies with that. And, of course, cost of living. Cost of living.
Absolutely huge. The
And,
amount of homeless on the Gold Coast is out of mind, out of sight.
Absolutely. And people are really struggling to make ends meet. Well and truly. What people are complaining about the most is really grocery items going up, how hard it is for them to be able to have their grocery budget met each week. So people are cutting back. They're buying cheaper cuts of meat. They're buying beef and lamb rather than buying seafood. I mean, it's unbelievable what people are having to do at the moment just to make ends meet.
And it's funny for some of us. We look at the price of beef, and obviously we had a forecast there that we were going to have a very dry season. The farmers sold their animals. Price of beef plummeted, but we didn't see that at the shopping centre.
No, we didn't.
And fuel is another one. We have a look at the fuel price rocking and rolling. It's been fairly steady, hasn't really wavered that much, but we're seeing a lot of variation at the Bowser. And again, two big questions that need to be looked at some point.
Yes, absolutely. And we're hearing from many of our hospitality businesses, our coffee shops and our restaurants, that people are stopping coming in now.
Yes.
So not just buying less, not coming in.
We're seeing the slowdown. We've got our first caller. It is a very good morning to Robin. Robin, ask your question of Karen.
Hello, Robin.
Yes, good morning. I think I might speak for quite a few elderly people.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see this 70% loading on private health cover removed from pensioners.
Mm-hmm.
The pensioners, if they want private health, and they haven't had it for a while, have to pay 70% loading. Or they got to sit around and wait for a couple of years on the public health.
So this is where there has been a break. So the pensioner has either not had private insurance or they've had a break from it. Is that correct? That's why you're
correct. Yep.
Yes. Look, I understand your concerns. I absolutely do. Private health insurance, and of course, if you don't have private health insurance and you're choosing to go to a private hospital and pay for it out of your pocket, is really starting to be unaffordable for many people. I think that we need to be looking at what we can possibly do to bring down the costs of private health insurance. The loadings were there to try and get people to maintain their private health insurance, but it's now at the point where it is so expensive for people to maintain that they've had to drop out, and which means that as we all get older and we need to have more stays in hospital, or we need more levels of care provided to us, many people are starting to look at what they can do to go back and get some private health insurance so that they can get their knees replaced or the hips replaced without the 2-3 year plus, in some cases, waiting lists for a public hospital. So, Robin, I think you're absolutely spot on with the costs of private health insurance, and I will certainly take that back to Canberra and do all I can to make sure that those issues are highlighted.
Yeah, well, I understand, like people who are working and can afford to pay the extra, but when you come to go on the pension and you've just missed out on having the insurance for a while,
yes,
it's just prohibitive.
Yep. Absolutely. And look, and that's a real public health policy issue as well, because we need to relieve pressure off our public health system, which means that we need to actively attract people to either stay in the private health area or to come back to it if they've left it as well too. And cost is prohibitive at the moment. So you're exactly right with what you're saying, Robin, and I will definitely take that up.
Thank you, Robin. That was a great little bit of information and a great question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, if you've got a question just like Robin, you can give us a call, 0755 208888 for Karen Andrews, federal member for McPherson. Now, we'll move on now. In the state budget handed down this week, there was money allocated for Stage 3 of the light rail, but nothing for Stage 4. Does this mean Stage 4 won't be going ahead?
Well, you're right in that there was no money for Stage 4. coming through. Council has done something in relation to costings for a business case, but I don't believe there was anything in the state budget for stage 4 of the light rail. There was additional funding to work towards the completion of stage 3, which is the Broadbeach to Burleigh. So that is already a project that's underway. It's just the allocation of the funding for that to go ahead. The light rail has always been very contentious. It started to get contentious around Burleigh in particular. The further south that you get, the more contentious it becomes as an issue. The critical area in terms of space is going down the Gold Coast Highway at Palm Beach.
It is.
The road is narrow. There's currently 2 lanes each way, and there's parking on the road. The parking will go, and it will just be 2 lanes now. It was going to the proposal from the state government was it would be 1 lane in parts, but it is now, I understand, going to be 2 lanes of traffic plus the light rail going through there. And we touched on overdevelopment earlier, and what people are saying to me is that with all the high rises that are going there along the Gold Coast Highway through Palm Beach, sometimes there's only 1 car space, but the household has 2 cars, which means that the second car is already parked out on the road somewhere. Where are all these cars going to park, let alone people who do want to catch, for example, a light rail? Where do they park their car to get on? Because there's no parking stations that are going to be there, which means that if the light rail goes down the Gold Coast Highway at Palm Beach, it will only be servicing those people that can walk to it.
Correct. And look, I used to live in Palm Beach, so you go a street or 2 back, and you've got a lot of old little units in there, and they're usually 2 bedrooms, and there's usually 2 or 3 cars involved, and they're chock-a-block on the street. There's nowhere to park. No,
and the situation is just getting worse as more people are moving into the area. Now, on one hand, people can say, isn't that great that everyone's learning to love Palm Beach, because it hasn't been the most popular many years ago. So that's good that people are seeing all that Palm Beach has to offer, but there's nowhere for them to park, and that hasn't been adequately addressed. So I was very clear several years ago when I said that I was concerned that the locals had not been listened to, that no one from the state government had come down and talked to them and heard what their views were and explained what work had been done to make sure that there were options that were being considered. So it's no wonder that things are where they are now, but certainly there was no money in the state budget that I could see for stage 4 of the light rail.
There we go. All right. If you've got a question for Karen Andrews, federal member for McPherson, 0755 208888. Forgive me if I feel like I'm rushing, Karen. There's a favourite question of mine later on in the list. So, in Melbourne earlier this week, 2 tobacco stores were the target of arson attacks. Over the past few weeks, we have seen there have been others, and we've seen others. Here on the Gold Coast, there seems to be tobacconists popping up everywhere. Yep. Are we likely to start seeing the same arson attacks, and why is this happening?
Well, you're right in that there are tobacconist shops that are popping up all over the Gold Coast as well. Some of those will well and truly be legitimate. Most, if not all, will sell legal products there, but many are also selling illicit tobacco products as well, whether it's cigarettes that have come into the country across our borders that haven't been detected, so no excise has been paid on them, or it's what's known as the chop, which is basically the tobacco itself that's being sold. People are constantly talking to me about how concerned they are. There are legitimate sellers of tobacco products that can't compete from a price point of view because the product that's coming in is cheaper, much cheaper, but it is illicit, what comes in. From a federal point of view, our role is to do what we can to stop this product coming in across the border. And often, tobacco is used to test a pathway for drugs to come in as well. So the more we can do to get rid of the tobacco, the better off we will be, not just for tobacco but also for drugs. Once the product is here, then basically the state police have the responsibility for the sale of an illegal product when they're here. Now, the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, did actually chair a meeting of police ministers last year, so there's a recognition that illicit tobacco is a problem. We're looking to hear what comes out of that. But in the meantime, I would ask people to let me know at my office if you think that there is a tobacconist working in your area that is selling a legal product.
Ah, lovely.
Yeah.
And Karen, do you know how this is getting into the country?
Basically, it's coming in through containers.
Right.
It's being shipped into the country. So,
And we physically can't look in every container.
No, Border Force relies on tip-offs coming through. They have detection dogs that can provide some level of assistance as well. But it's a product that has got some pretty strong dollars attached to it as well too. And if a few shipments get lost across the way, it's not really upsetting these criminals too much. The same as drugs. Drugs coming into the country, they sell at a high price here in Australia, and sadly Australians have a very big appetite for drugs. So if there are a few containers that get picked up along the way, so they're lost revenue for the Crims, they don't particularly care about it. But the ability for us to check every single container that comes into the country is just not there.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's interesting. We've got our second and third callers, so we might dive in and have a few questions answered. All right. It is a very good morning to Warwick. Warwick, ask your question of Karen.
Hello, Warwick.
Good morning, Karen. Regarding your cost of living and food,
Yep.
there's an interesting item on the Ben Fordham show I heard recently, and that's the Brazilian company. There's the world's largest meat processing company, and they own the majority, not all, but the majority of the major Australian abattoirs, including the abattoirs at Dinmore that used to be owned by a really well-known Australian company that was taken over, TA Fields. Mm-hmm. Now, Fordham's point was that the price that the farmers are getting, the cattle people are getting for the meat at the sale yard versus what it arrives at the butcher shop, there's an incredible difference. We know about processing cost and loss, but it appears that this Brazilian company, which has got a fairly unsavoury reputation internationally, might be doing very well indeed. Your staff might be able to do an investigation and they can hand that to the Agriculture Minister of the federal government.
Yes, well, we certainly will take a look at that. Look, it's been a concern for a long time that our farmers, the primary producers, are not getting the benefits of what consumers are actually paying for the product in the supermarket. And there's got to be a better way where the farmers get more and it's at a lesser price for the consumer. But there's a lot of middlemen in between that are taking various cuts out of the processing. That doesn't help. We certainly don't want too much money to be going overseas from the processing of meat here in Australia. But the more information that we can get to take through to the Agriculture Minister, who is Senator Murray Watt, the better off we're going to be. So I will take a closer look at that, Warwick. And if you've got any more information, please send it through to me in my office.
Sure. It's an interesting line to follow because there's a lot of supermarket bashing, but maybe it's the middleman and some of these other processors that are doing very well indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed. So, no, I think you're onto something there, Warwick.
Warwick, thank you very much for your question.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on now to Tristan. Good morning, Tristan. Ask your question of Karen.
Hi, Tristan.
Oh, hello, Karen. I wonder whether you could help me, please. I have got bladder cancer, and I've been getting treatment for a while, but now it's got to the stage that I have to get a bit of a thing called immunotherapy, which is one of the more recent sort of world-class treatments. But unfortunately, there's a drug that they use with it. It's called Keytruda, Keytruda, and it cost me just under $3,000 a treatment, and the treatment lasts for about an hour. And I was just wondering, was there any chance that you could be kind enough to make some representation to the Minister for Health regarding maybe putting this on the PBS? Because I know there's a few other people who are in a similar situation to me, and it's sort of getting a little bit costly to keep doing it. But any help? I was talking to a gentleman after treatment who was in a different room, and he was getting the immunotherapy, but it was for melanomas. And with melanomas, because it's on the PSB, he was only paying like $500 a year for treatment, and I've got to do this treatment every 3 weeks, which, as I said, is just under $3,000 a trip, you know.
Yeah.
So I was wondering whether you could help me, please.
I will certainly do my best, Tristan. I'm very sorry to hear that you're unwell, and yes, I will do what I can to try and assist you. I have actually taken up this issue about immunotherapy and the costs with the health minister, but I'm very happy to do it again. Tristan, can I get you to give my office a call? They will be listening into today's program as well. So they'll be expecting your call. The number is 5580 9111.
Yes.
Yep.
9111. Okay, I'll do that, Karen.
Yep. And we'll get some more information and we'll do our best to help you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Tristan.
Thank
you for your call. All right, we're getting to the final 5 minutes of the program. 0755 208888 is the number if you've got a question for Karen Andrews, federal member for McPherson. And can I jump ahead?
Please do, because I'm dying to know what your what your question's going to be.
My favourite topic is nuclear power, and we're hearing a lot about it in the news. We're hearing a lot of wishy-washy, watered-down stuff. But do you support nuclear power?
The simple answer to that is yes, I do. It's definitely something that we need to be having a conversation here in Australia about. When I was the industry minister, so we're now going back a few years, I spoke to a number of the very high users of electricity, so businesses that used a lot of electricity, and, smelters, for example.
Sure.
And basically what happens is that when the power is required, they have to come offline so that power can be used for, residences, for example. I spoke to them on a what-if scenario basis, which was if there was an opportunity for you to have your own small modular reactor here so that you could power your own energy needs, never have to come offline because power was needed elsewhere. Would you be interested in doing that? And the response was very well qualified because at this stage you have to change the legislation to be able to do that in Australia. But basically they said they would be interested in having a look at that because the cost to them of coming offline was enormous. So the security of supply, the control of the costs was something that was very important to them. So I think we've got a couple of opportunities. One is to look at what we can do to empower these large businesses, these large users of electricity to be able to provide their own power needs. But then I think we've got to look, we've got ageing coal-fired power stations right across the country, and here in Queensland, some of them are well and truly past their design life, and are still limping along. We need to look at what we can do to co-locate or locate something that's going to be very close to the current distribution network that we've got. But that needs a very frank and a very open conversation.
It does.
So the sooner we're in a position to be able to say, this is what the indicative costing is going to be, this is where the indicative sites are, let's actually have a sensible and rational conversation about how we're going to meet our energy needs into the future, the better.
Indeed. Yeah, look, it's one of my favourite topics. I studied it. It wasn't what I studied at uni, but it was one of my pet projects at uni. And the technology's evolved quite considerably from the 50s all the way through to the point in the last 20 years Bill Gates has got involved. They've solved the problem of melting downs and those issues that we saw at Fukushima and so forth. So, again, talking about the safety aspect, yes, dispelling all of the concerns and worries, and I think that it's free power. Really, we've got all of the ore in the backyard of Australia. All we need to do is put it into one of these machines, and basically we meet our targets. What's the term we're looking for? On track to meet our 2030 obligations.
Yes.
So again, it could take a little bit of time to get them off the ground, but there are talk about these small modular reactors as well.
Yep, absolutely. And look, and I think we should fast track the discussions as well too. I mean, we don't want a 10-year consultation process here.
No.
We need to have a serious process of talking to the communities that may well be home to these reactors, these plants. Let's have a conversation right across Australia, and it's either a yes or it's a no.
Absolutely. And that's how it should be in most of the things that we do nowadays.
Well, absolutely. Consultation is important. It's critical, in fact, but let's make it sensible and timely.
All right, I'm going to throw one last question at you. It's you talked about the cost of living earlier, and housing is a big part of that. Are interest rates likely to come down this year?
Yeah. Look, let me look into the crystal ball. Who knows what the Reserve Bank is actually going to do? They'll be looking at a wide range of indicators. I would have to say that the economic indicators that I'm seeing would indicate that there's likely to be no change for a little while. The Reserve Bank obviously has access to a lot more information, so we'll see what they do. The Governor has already said she'll be keeping a very close eye on what's happening with inflation. They don't want the economy to overheat at all. So they'll be looking at what's happening there. They'll be looking at housing. They'll be looking at affordability. They'll be looking at a whole range of economic indicators, unemployment levels, which have dropped as well. But when we've got everyone out there working, there's more money that's being spent, and potentially the Reserve Bank is going to look at how much money is actually being spent out there, and if it is going to push our inflation up, then they will look at what levers they have, and one of those levers is interest rates.
There we go. Well, we know we have a state election coming up. When's the federal one? Question without notice.
Question without notice. I don't know. The first date that the Prime Minister can call the election effectively is the beginning of August.
Okay.
For an election in the beginning of August. I don't think that's likely, because that would be meaning that he would be calling the election in the next couple of weeks. So I think that's unlikely. So it'll be sometime from August of this year, most likely through until May of next year. But my money is probably on later rather than sooner.
We've got one last call. I'm going to sneak it in, and our local news is going to be a little bit late, and I apologise. I'll probably see the newsroom throwing things at the window. But here is Maury. Maury, ask your question of Karen.
Hello.
Oh, hello. It's Maureen speaking.
Oh, sorry,
Hello, Maureen.
It's all about school bullying.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, all the states combined about the adult violence, and I'm wondering if that same thing could happen with school bullying and having one program, because I believe that there's a lot of cover-up with school bullying, and I attended a lecture in Melbourne many years ago, and one of the schools, the teacher spoke about his school, where they had one of the worst bullies in the state, and because of their program, which highly organised, they were able to eliminate 80% of the bullying very quickly. And I can send you more details of what I can remember, but I feel that we can eliminate a lot of the adult bullying by making sure that there are strict rules about the bullying, where the children who complain are protected, and the teachers and all the schools principals would be protected because of the strict program of reporting and recording even the minor bullying.
Right, Maureen, great point. Have you got a question for Karen? We're running a little short on time, unfortunately.
Yes, I am wondering if Karen could initiate in Parliament that it becomes a federal matter.
Okay, let me have a think about that and see what I can possibly do, Maureen. Basically, the education and the operationalisation of education, so the schools, largely sit within the state and territory remit. But let me see what I can do from a federal point of view, and I'll give it my best shot.
We'll have Ray Stevens in the coming weeks, Maureen. If you keep an ear out for him, that might be a good question for Ray.
Oh, thank you so much. I believe it's a federal matter as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Maureen.
Thank you.
All right, that was a nice little session. We had some great questions, great information, some great questions from the field, and we got on to my favourite topic.
Absolutely. What more could you ask for?
Karen, are we going to see you back anytime soon? I don't think I've talked to your office about new dates, so have a look on our website. If we can slot Karen in the coming months, we'd love to see you back, Karen.
I would love to come back. feedback. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Karen Andrews, a federal member for McPherson.